What are you worried about today? What are you feeling some anxiety about today? Who fills you with anxiety even just at the mention of their name? Just say that name, everything changes. What circumstances can steal your joy and peace just by even thinking about them? Just by thinking about it. You walk out of church, that circumstance comes to mind, and all of the joy and the peace and the heavenly vibes that were taking place in this place can just boom, fly away like a bird. Worry, aka anxiety, makes us appear as idol worshipers. Serving a God who can't be trusted. Worry makes us appear as idol worshipers, serving a God who can't be trusted. Can your God be trusted?
Yes, sir.
When we worry, when I worry, when you worry, when we worry, it's as if we're saying, our God can't be trusted. And if our God can't be trusted, he's not God at all, he's an idol. But yes, our God can be trusted. Because he's the all-loving God, which means he seeks his highest good for us always and at all times.
All right. Thank you, Lord.
He seeks his highest good for us. And he is a faithful God, so he always seeks his highest good for us no matter what. He can be trusted. He's the all-wise God. He's the all-knowing God, and wisdom is the skillful use of knowledge. So not only does he know everything, but he has all wisdom, and so he knows exactly how to take care of the things that concern us and the things that are in our life.
Yes.
And just in case you needed to know this, he's also the all-powerful God.
Amen.
So all those things, all those plans he designs, because he's sovereign and in control of everything, he's got the power to do it all.
Yes.
He's not weak. He ain't no punk. Huh. And he's everywhere present. So he sees every situation we're in. He knows all about it.
Yes.
That's the good news, too. He knows all about it. You're not alone. He's aware of every circumstance.
Thank you, Lord.
The disciples had left everything to follow him. They left their careers, some of them. Wow. Some of them left their businesses. Young men, starting out in business. Trajectory, yeah. Jesus says, follow me. And they follow him, leaving it all behind. Some of them had wealth. Some of them had status. All of them, I'm sure, had dreams. And they had family. And Jesus said, follow me. And what he meant by follow me was leave it all behind and follow me. Leave it all behind and trust me. That's what he's saying. Trust me. If you're going to tell me to leave my career and my family and everything I own behind, I'm saying he's telling you, trust me. Trust me. The journey with Jesus is a walk of faith. And as they started walking, I wonder if they sang that song, I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me.
Yes.
If I was a singing pastor, I would sing.
You are.
I'll leave that to the experts. You can hum it in your head. These mostly young people may have been tempted to be worried about not having the security they used to have in life. You know what I mean? Jobs offer security. Man, you lose your job? That's a very insecure feeling, to not know where your next paycheck is coming from. Maybe they were anxious about their futures. They may have been especially anxious about their immediate future. Jesus, what are we going to eat? Where's our next meal coming from? Jesus, where are we going to sleep tonight? Where am I going to lay my head? What's going on? Tell me what's up. Because I don't know. Luke chapter 12, verse 22. We're invited into that situation. We're invited into that circumstance as Jesus addresses his disciple on what may have been some of their concerns as he speaks directly to them. Luke chapter 12, verse 22 says, "And he said to his disciples, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious or stop being worried." That's what he's saying. Stop being worried. So were they concerned, anxious, and worried? Evidently they were. Because he's telling them, stop being worried about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. So you look at that passage, that first line especially, it says, and he said to his disciples, meaning there was something before that. Then he says, therefore, which means there was something before that. So we have to look at what those two words are forcing us to look to as he addresses them, and we will do that for a moment. Last time we got together and looked at Luke, the title was Don't Be a Rich Fool. Luke chapter 12, verses 20 to 21 were the last two verses that we looked at. They summarize the Lord's teaching when he addressed the parable about the very rich man, but the very foolish man. Rich and foolish, not a good combination. So, Luke 12, verses 20 and 21, just to summarize and bring us to this point. But God said to him, fool. God called him a fool. This night, because he had put all of his investments in life, all of his time, talents, his wealth, everything had been invested in that which is temporal and nothing eternal. So Jesus says, but God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? Because you've heard it said, you've never seen a U-Haul following, or you've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul. So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Foolish. Foolish. That's the lesson. So, Luke 12, 22 and 23. And he, Jesus, and he said to his disciples, therefore, I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. So Jesus is teaching further on how not to die with temporal, earthly riches, but no heavenly, eternal riches. He's teaching further on how not to have that situation come about. And it's real easy for us as Americans to do, because we're such a we are filthy rich compared to most of the world. Filthy rich, just so rich. We got stuff coming out of our ears. We got storage places all over that are just popping up. We got thousands and thousands of storage places now because we got so much stuff. When a wise person lives focused on eternal investments much more than on temporal investments, the Lord calls them wise. That's the wise person. When we live for the next life, we get this one thrown in. When we live for this life, we miss the next life totally and completely. Live for that one, you got this one. Live for this one, you don't have that one. Proverbs 12:25 said this about anxiety and worry. Specifically anxiety in Proverbs 12:25. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down. Or anxiety in our hearts causes us to be sad. Brings about a certain amount of sadness in our hearts. And even some are so weighted down with anxiety, they're depressed. And it's caused depression because of the anxiety. Weighs us down. You ever watch Andy Griffith? In the show, his name is Andy Taylor. And his little boy's name is Opie. And in the opening scene, you know that. And so you see Andy and Opie, they're walking along, and I think Andy's got the fishing rod over his shoulder. Does Opie pick up a rock and throw it, I think, or something like that? Yeah. And so Opie loves to pick up rocks. And so let's say that they didn't go to a fishing hole, but they continued down that road in North Carolina, and Andy just wants to show him all the beautiful things in the woods and in the forests of North Carolina. And so they walk along the road, and Opie looks at the rocks, and he's fascinated by the rocks, and he puts one in his pocket. He says, "That's my rock." And then, like a little boy does, he gets another one, and then he puts more in his pockets until they're bulging, the front pockets. He starts to put them in his back pocket, and then Andy, being the good father that he is, this is a new episode of Andy Griffith. Andy, being the good father that he is, says, "Oh, that's not the best idea right now, son, putting those rocks in your pocket," however you talk. But Opie says, "No, Pop, no, Dad, I like them. And so they walk further, and the further they walk, the further behind Opie gets, because he's got his front pockets full, both of them, back pockets full, and his blue jeans, in his cuffs, he's putting rocks, and he's walking like this. Son, he looks back and says, "Son, I told you that wasn't a good idea." So they didn't get very far. They didn't get down the road where Andy Taylor was going to get to show his son the birds that were down there further and some of the wild animals. And he just wasn't going to show him some of the beauty that's there in nature, because Opie was weighted down and couldn't go any further. The sun started going down. They had to go back home. And that's what happens to us. If we get weighted down with anxiety, we don't see the things that God has for us, because we're weighted down, and he's like, "Let's go. This is my plan for you. Look at those footsteps. Those are the footsteps I want you to walk in." And we're like, worry is just... And sometimes with worry, we just go and sit down, and because of the depression, and it causes us to have a lack of motivation. Worry is not a good thing. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down. Luke 12:22-23, and he says to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing." This is talking about values. And so I ask myself as I read this, are our values in alignment with the Lord's? What are we to put value on as we live the life that he has called us to live? Are my values in alignment with his? In a marriage relationship, if the values of a couple differ, there's always clashing, because he values this, she values that. And if they don't value the same things, they kind of war against one another. It's one of the biggest problems in marriage is just values. We say it's finances, but it's values is what it amounts to. And even with the Lord, do we value what he values? We don't want to be out of alignment with the king. We don't want to be in his values. We don't want to be out of alignment with how things are done in the kingdom. But when we value that which is not what the king values, that's an issue. Let's say that Tiger Woods was teaching his son, who's a better golfer than anybody in here. Let's say that he's teaching his son, how to play golf. And his son gets down there, and Tiger's looking at him, and he's getting ready to teach him, proper swing. And all of a sudden, his son is like picking his clothes, making sure his shoes are polished and shining, making sure everything on him is just right, and all of his clothes are right. Tiger's like, "What are you doing, dude?" And he's like, "I got to make sure I look good." Yeah, well, if you're a golfer and all you care about is how you look in terms of your clothing, your values are wrong. What you should be valuing is your swing. How to get that swing just right so you can be good at golf. You're no good in the game if it's just your value and stuff that doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. But if that's all that you're valuing, it's not according to how the game is played, and we just won't be as successful. It's like the daughter who's being taught how to cook by her mother, and all the daughter wants to do, she don't care anything about measurements and ingredients and all that. She just wants to polish the silverware and make sure the pots are clean and make sure they're shiny. I was like, no, what's important is what's inside the pot, not what's on the outside. What do we value? Do we value what the word says we should value? Do we value what the king says we should value? Now, God isn't saying in these passages that we shouldn't care about our basic needs. When you read the book of Proverbs, you know that that's not what he's saying. Proverbs talks about making sure, he says, look at the ant, you sluggard. The ant, he goes and makes sure he's got what he needs. And we need to do that. God gives us common sense. And yet, even though he tells us to be diligent about those things, he's saying don't give them more importance than what they should really have. Don't give them more importance than what they should have. He says life consists of so much more than these things. Luke 12:24 goes on to say, consider the ravens, they neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. That's a great question. Of how much more value are you than the birds? So Jesus asked them that question. Let's ask ourselves that question. I'm going to give you a moment just to ask yourself that question. Just think, of how much more value are we, of how much more value am I than the birds? He mentions ravens here. Ravens are in fact scavengers. That's what they are. And therefore, in the mind of a Jew and in the mind of these disciples, they were unworthy of the care of God. They were unclean. Scavengers were unclean, so they were unworthy of the care of God, and anything that was unclean, they didn't want any part of and thought it had no value whatsoever. So ravens had no value to them whatsoever, and yet the Lord is saying, aren't you much more valuable than these ravens? And of course the answer is yes. Your Heavenly Father values you far more than he values them. Did you know that ravens, once they can fly, they're kicked out of the nest? I mean, just as soon as they can fly, they're kicked out of the nest and they're on their own. Can't come back. Bird, you're on your own. Fend for yourself. And it's interesting that Job, in Job chapter 38, verse 41, asked this question, who provides for the raven its prey when its young ones cry to God for help? Those young ones crying to God for help are the ones that get kicked out of the nest as soon as they know how to fly. And they wander about for lack of food. What's the answer? Who's the answer to that question? God. God. Obviously God. Again, the point is not that we neglect our families. The point is that God takes care of birds that depend upon him. God takes care of creatures that depend upon him for moment by moment sustenance. And if he does that, how much more is he going to take care of his children? How would it be if, as a father, what would you think of a father who fed the hamster, but not his daughter? What would you think of that? Feed the hamster, but not your daughter. Foolish. 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 Don't you value your daughter more than a hamster? Well, God is saying, I created you in my image, my very image. Nobody else is created in my image. I'm becoming more like my father the older I get. I love to watch, especially a Saturday afternoon dinner, I love to watch nature shows. I love to see the animal kingdom, and it's just so fascinating how God provides for them. And the mind that designed all of nature, it didn't just boom, bang, happen. God created it. He thought of it. It's intelligent design, obviously. And the part I hate about those shows is when they say we're like all the other, we're just a little bit above all the other animals. We're not animals. We're people, humans, created in the image of God.
Amen.
And he cares about us. He loves us. He values us. David said, what is man that you are mindful of him? David, looking at the entire universe, David didn't have the Hubble telescope. We do. We get to see all of the pictures of space and the magnificence of it, and knowing that there's at least 200 billion galaxies out there with trillions and trillions and trillions of stars. And David says, what is man? They say you can see 4,000 stars with the naked eye on a clear night someplace in the world. And that's all he could see, but even with that, he was awestruck. What is man that you're mindful of him? We're so little compared to all of this. God says, you are valuable to me. You're my children. You're my child. I love you. I care for you. I do care about those things that you're caring about. Now take care of. Martin Luther, that great reformer, that great preacher of the word, also had a favorite preacher. Martin Luther's favorite preacher was Robin. And every day, Robin Redbreast preached a sermon, Martin Luther said, to him. Because every day Martin Luther would take crumbs and put them out on the window seal. He would put them out on the window seal, crumbs, and he could see the robin's home from his window, and he would watch the robin fly over and get his fill of the crumbs. And then he said the robin would fly back to its nest, fly back to its home, and begin to chirp the praises of God. His stomach was full. He was chirping. He was happy. And then he said, as the sun went down, he got quiet and he slept the rest of the night. And he said, every day that happened, and every day that robin preached a sermon to me that God, if he cares for that robin, if he cares for the birds, how much more is he not going to care for me? Don't you see the birds? They find food everywhere. He even feeds the vultures.
Oh. Yeah.
He does.
I know.
What you say, gotta eat? Luke 12:25 says, and which of you by being anxious can add a single hour to his span of life? Actually, worry takes away hours from our span of life. So the more you worry about how long you're going to live, the less, the more you're cutting your time for living. Somebody said that for many of us, worry is the source of headaches, backaches, heartaches, and belly aches. Worry makes temperatures, somebody said this, worry makes tempers short and our days long. Isn't that true? You get anxious and worried, the temper is short, the days get longer. Doctors tell us that we don't get stomach ulcers from what we eat, but from what? What's eating us. John Calvin, great reformer also. I didn't know this. John Calvin was prone to anxiety and worry. John Calvin. Anybody believed in the sovereignty of God, John Calvin did. But he was prone to anxiety and worry. Calvin said this, those who are extremely anxious wear themselves out and become their own executioners. So Calvin, who struggled with it, said, I think I'm killing myself with the anxiety and the worry. Worry and anxiety actually take hours from our life. So which of you, verse 25, Luke 12:25, which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his lifespan? If then you are not able to do as small a thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Luke 12:27 says, consider the lilies of the field. They grow, they neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon, in all his glory, was not clothed or not arrayed, not dressed, not adorned like one of these. The plant world doesn't work. And yet, our Father arrays them, clothes them, dresses them. Our Father adorns them better than the richest, most fabulously adorned king that ever lived. He says, look at Solomon, but then look at these fields of flowers. You ever see a field of flowers and it's just breathtaking? You look around and you look at it, you're like, whoa, look at the beauty of that. That's God's creation. And he says, I'm clothing the field. I'm making that field look so good. And you know what? Those flowers, that grass is here today and poof, it's gone tomorrow. Yep. Get this brother to come by and do his job and poof, it's gone. That's not valuable. Grass clippings, are they valuable? No, you throw them away. You don't want them. A dead flower, throw it away. He says, if I make something with that little value, that beautiful, how much more do you think I care about you and what you wear? I do care about your basic necessities and your basic needs. He's saying this to people that he asked to leave everything. He's saying this to people that he asked to leave everything. Job, career, next week's paycheck. To follow him, to trust him. And you know what? He asks us to do certain things. And he says, follow me, trust me. Has the Lord ever asked you to do something difficult? Has he ever asked you to do something hard?
Yeah.
Some people he's asked to, on this subject, some people he's asked to cut their pay. Take another job. This is where I want to fit you. This is where I want you to be. And it's less money. Now, it's nice when it's more money, because sometimes it happens that way too. But sometimes it's not. Or sometimes move here. Or sometimes turn that position down because it's going to take your total attention away from me. You won't be able to serve me if you take that position. Luke 12:28, our final verse in this passage, says, "But if God so clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today, and tomorrow is thrown in the oven, how much more will he clothe you?" And then that statement tagged on, but purposely tagged on. "O you of little faith." What would you think of a God who clothed the fields but not his people? What would you think of a father who planted all the flowers in the yard, gave the yard really good-looking clothing, but didn't clothe his children, just had them in rags? Spent all this time and attention and investment on the yard and how the flowers looked and how the yard was beautiful for everyone to look at, but never bought a stitch of clothing for his children. No. So God says, I'm not going to do that to you. Notice what he's talking about are basic needs. It's hard for us to comprehend this because we're so rich, but he's talking about basic needs. Our next couple of times together, he's going to be talking about basic needs. Because of the value that God has assigned to us as human beings and as his children, we don't have to be filled with anxiety regarding our temporal needs. Because of the value that he's assigned to us, we don't have to be concerned. We don't have to be worried. We don't have to be filled with anxiety about our temporal needs. Having much worry and anxiety comes from having little faith. Having much worry and anxiety comes from having little faith. Let's close this way by looking at another book. Matthew chapter 14, change of scenery, change of situation. Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 to 23. Jesus with his disciples. Then he tells them, get in the boat, see you on the other side. So immediately, in Matthew 14:22, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat, by this time, was a very long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking, can you imagine? What if you were there? You ever been on a boat and the water's been kind of choppy? Ever been on and a storm is going on and it's nighttime? Ever been on a boat at nighttime? But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. As one might expect, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. They were scared to death, as we would have been. Seeing somebody walk on the water in the dead of night when the seas were choppy. But immediately, Jesus spoke to them. I really think that when we are in a state of fear and anxiety like the disciples were, that God speaks to us. And I really think if we would stop screaming and shouting so loudly, we'd hear his voice. But sometimes we're so fearful And so shouting and screaming on the inside, in our spirits and in our hearts and our souls and our minds. God is speaking. He's not shouting at us. He wants to speak to us with that calm voice that gives assurance and comfort and security. I think he just waits for us to calm down, like a parent whose kid's having a temper tantrum. You could get in there and holler. You know, you see it sometimes in the store. The kid's having a temper tantrum. Parent handles it all wrong. They get down there with the kid and acting like the kid. And
You better get up.
Walmart. And so I think that when we're shouting and screaming from worry and anxiety on the inside, God is speaking to us like he did the disciples. We just need to calm ourselves enough and trust him enough to hear his voice as he speaks words of encouragement and instruction. So, Matthew 14:27 says, "But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, 'Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid.'" The Lord does not want our hearts to be filled with fear. He wants them to be filled with faith. And Peter answered him, "Lord," of course, Peter, "Lord, if it is you," and this is Peter. You know, I said, of course, Peter, but check out Peter. "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come and walk on the water, and I know I'll be able to walk on the water if it's you. That's what he's saying. If you're in a boat and say to the person walking on water, if you tell me to come walk on the water to you, and I'll step out of this boat. Come on. And what did Peter do? "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." It took a lot of guts to say that. None of the other guys said that. They weren't walking on that water. They were in a storm. They didn't want to be in the boat in a storm, much less walking on the water in a storm. He said, "Come." One word. So when you're worried and anxious, the Lord may just say one thing to you. And then you're like, still asking for something else. And he said, "Do the first thing I told you to do. Just come on. Do the first thing I told you to do. Then I'll tell you the next thing." Again, I love the example because it happens every time I go to the store. Those lighted refrigerators with all the stuff in them. It doesn't light up till you get there. Take another step, bam, another light. Now I can see. Another step, bam, another light. That's the way it is. He said, "Come." That's how he deals with us. Come. So Peter got out. Don't be talking about Peter. Peter got out of the boat. He walked on water. Peter walked on water. Yeah, but he's saying, but he walked on water. We always look to the sinking part. Well, there's a lesson in that, which we're going to get to. But he walked. Oh, the Chosen video doesn't even do it justice. I want to see it on the big 900 trillion K Jumbotron in heaven. I want to see it when I get there. Okay? All right. Where are we? Verse 30? But, here we go. "But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, 'Lord, save me.'" Not like that, but he shouted, cried it out. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him. The Lord was right there. He doesn't want us to sink. He don't want us to sink. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him. Jesus grabbed him.
Yes, sir.
Jesus grabbed him. Jesus grabbed him. You hear me?
Yes.
He didn't want him to sink. So he stopped him, saying to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when he got into the boat, the wind ceased. Those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So what's that situation? What's that situation? where Jesus has asked you to do something. And maybe you began to do it. But looking at the circumstances and the situation and the lack and getting the worry and the fear arising in our hearts, stuff begins to happen. We begin to sink. You know what the Lord is saying? Come. Just come to me. You can do it. You can make it. I'm not going to let you drown. Don't look at the wind around. Don't look at that which would naturally make you fearful. I'm a supernatural God. I can do above and beyond all of that. I can take control of that. I can move in the midst of that. I can do miraculous things in the midst of that. Don't look at those things. Just look at me. Just like you do those little kids. Look at me. Don't look over there. Don't look over there. I'm talking to you. Come, look at me. This is how it gets done. This is how it gets done. We got to get our face in here. Here he is right here. Lord, I want to see you. Here he is right here. Lord, I want to hear from you. Here he is right here. Lord, I need instruction. I need your voice. I need you to tell me what to do. Here it is right here. It's in the prayer room back there. It's in your prayer room at home. That's where it is. It's in fellowship with one another, encouraging one another. That's where it is. That's how we hear from one another. Stand, please. Yeah, come on up, team. Faith in God. Lord, increase our faith. Lord, increase our faith. Those wind and those waves in our natural state are scary. In our natural state, there's things that are scary in our life. There are things that happen to us from time to time that are scary. But I am not sure what's going to happen. My goodness. And sometimes we cause those things. Father, increase our faith. That's our prayer. Increase our faith. May we not look at those things that would naturally cause us anxiety. May we not be distracted by those things that would naturally cause us anxiety when we are doing the things that you called us to do. You called Peter to come out of that boat. You told him to come, which meant everything would be okay. Lord, as you give us instruction in our life, you tell us to come and follow you, which means everything will be okay. Yes, there will be some storms. There will be hurricanes where the rain's coming down from above. The winds are blowing from side to side. The floods are coming from underneath us. Everything is hitting us from all sides, every which way. But you say come, and you grab hold of us. Lord, help us to come and follow you. That's our desire. And so we are challenged this morning to not look at the things that would distract us, that would bring fear and cause fear. We are challenged this morning to look to you in Jesus' name.